There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. All right, so I'll repeat. All right, so we just wanted to review some of the guidelines for this, for the COVID Hero training sessions. These sessions are designed to enhance general well-being for healthcare workers facing stress due to the COVID-19 pandemic. By participating in these sessions, you're indicating understanding of the fact that these sessions are not meant as a replacement for assessment or treatment of any mental health conditions. Importantly, if you or anyone you know is having thoughts of harming themselves or others, to call COPES or the Laureate Psychiatric Clinic and Hospital Clinical Assessment Department, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, or simply 911. Please let us know at this email address or that phone number listed there if you'd like us to provide you with any referrals for additional services. Although this is a safe platform and private platform, we can guarantee your confidentiality given that other individuals may be joining us. So please keep any information that you would like to keep confidential or keep it to yourself. You are not required to have your video active or engage through audio-only connections. You can also chat us if you feel more comfortable with that, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, so to enable everyone's focus and to increase privacy, it is ideal if you can join us from your private locations. As we mentioned earlier, these sessions will be recorded and potentially available for others to view, so keep that in mind as well. But these videos will not include any information provided on chat messaging, but anything you say on video or audio will be on them. Okay, so I think then that's it.
Yeah. And just to open this up, so so this is part of a larger kind of COVID Hero program where we have several sessions, and as you know, as you may know, we conducted an intro session that kind of gave an overview of these. But the idea is to focus on the sessions that you feel like would be most helpful for you. So we don't necessarily want everybody bombarding themselves with all of these things that they don't feel like they're useful for them. So this isn't something where you have to do every single session in order to get benefit out of it. You can kind of pick and choose which ones you want. So on that note, so we have jumped from the intro session for this session, we're focusing on problem solving strategies to enhance resilience. And then I believe on Thursday will be helpful thinking. And then we'll do healthy connections next week. And then we are going to reschedule. We'd had managing reactions with mindfulness and enhancing positive emotions and meaning scheduled for last week, but I think email invites hadn't gotten sent out in time, so we'll reschedule those for kind of a couple weeks, so after we finish the healthy connection. So please stay tuned for those, and we are going to be trying to post all of these videos so then people can rewatch or kind of jump around and do the ones that they feel like are most useful for them. Do you want me to take over, Namik, or do you want to start?
Yeah,
either one.
Either way. So in thinking about today's session and problem solving, we want to sort of start with discussing what our plate looks like, and acknowledging that at any given point in time, we have a limited amount of energy and resources to deal with the kinds of things that we face in our daily lives. So work, our home life or daily life, and our relationships. So this is sort of our pie or our plate and the kinds of things that we put on day-to-day basis. And it's very important to notice that we can, every time we feel like we're running out of resources, we can replenish them with sleep or leisure or time with family and friends. So at any given point, each of these can influence the other and help improve our sort of energy within that area. When crises such as COVID or epidemics or large-scale stressors happen, they may actually take over and really consume a lot of our cognitive resources that we're typically devoting to other things. So everything else kind of gets shrunk and pushed to the side, while most of our attention and energy and resources go to the one thing that we're particularly dealing with. So something like COVID is like a big stressor. And so a lot of our brain power will go to it, a lot of our energy will go to it, all of our attention and focus will go to it. And so we have this nice little cartoon of what it might feel like given such a long period of time of focusing on such a large scale stressor and ignoring a lot of the other things that we may derive ways to re-energize. We may feel like we're running on empty or feel like we're running out of steam. And so the purpose of this session is to help us learn how to prioritize things that we have to deal with, the problems we have to tackle, and find ways to devote our limited cognitive resources to solving those things at hand that are important to us and that are immediate, but also how to go about to do it efficiently and successfully. So to get us started, we'll start with a video, and let me make sure. Robin, did you have anything else to add to that?
Nope, I think I'm good right now.
All right, and
one thing to point out is that I think a lot of our sessions with COVID Hero, a lot of them focus on different mechanisms maybe we can use to make ourselves feel less empty on the on kind of those cognitive resources of whether it's mindfulness or enhancing our engagement in kind of positive activities and things. I think all those things can kind of make us feel more energized and kind of give us some more resources to like have more energy to deal with things. And I think this one, in terms of problem solving, I think some of the important aspects are, really trying to prioritize, like Namik said, and identify the things we really need to focus our attention on so that we're not taking up space with things that maybe don't need our attention right now. And prioritizing what, at any one time, just prioritizing the most important things to consider at that time. I know and I'm not even on the front lines, but I feel like, at the end of the day, I notice myself feeling more tired than I usually do. And just, even if you're not, there's not explicit things throughout your day that you're dealing with related to COVID, just the worry or just the anticipation of what is going to happen, or just the small things day to day, they add up and they take up space and they take energy away. And so I think with the problem solving session, we really kind of wanted to focus on the idea of identifying what's most important to spend your efforts on in terms of making decisions and solving problems. Yeah, so I think that's just one thing I wanted to add. And I think as we go through this, I might just, I know, you might put in the chat if you can think of, because we would love to use a real life example if you're willing to share. So like if you have a particular challenge or a particular problem that you feel like you need to dedicate effort to, we'd love to hear that. So if you have something, you might just type it into the chat and we can kind of use that as an example as we go through. If not, we have examples, but just put that out there. And so, so what we're going to be focusing on is, one, just how to figure out if something is worth dedicating your time to problem solve. Because if we problem solved everything in our life, we wouldn't have time. I mean, we would be full. So we have to, identify how to prioritize what problems to solve. And then also how to break those problems down, and then kind of the steps to go through to solve those problems. So, this session isn't to solve the problems for anyone, but to just talk through the process of solving those problems. Namik, you want to take it a little bit from here?
Sure. Yeah. So as we'll see if I post anything on the chat about a potential problem. But so we mentioned that we'll go over 4 different steps of thinking about problem solving and solving problems. And the first step usually is the one we think of is to define the problem and decide the ownership of that problem. So that might seem silly, but sometimes it's really hard to kind of figure out what the problem is. And so we want to make sure that we are clearly stating what it is that we're trying to tackle and to make it very specific and as simple and as clear as possible. And so, for example, a problem can be, I am worried about spreading the virus to my family. And what's really important in this, so clearly defined, I'm a healthcare worker, I'm on the front lines, and there's a chance here that I will be exposed to the virus. So there's this worry that I will spread it to my family. And so the next step after that is to decide, well, what do I have control over here? And this is really important in problem solving, because we want to focus on the things that are in our control, not what's outside of our control. What's outside of the control, we would like to potentially just kind of let go of or reconsider at a later time. So in this situation, it would be the things like the steps I can take to decontaminate when I get home, washing my hands, wiping things down that I come into contact with. But other things that I might be worrying about that's completely out of my control is the availability, for example, of disinfectant at a store, what my physical space in my home looks like, and what I'm exposed to at work. Those are the things that are a little bit more uncertain, they're unknown, and they are definitely a little bit more out of our control. And so at this point, we want to define the problem and decide which aspects of that problem are in our control before we move on to the next steps.
Since it sounds like there was maybe some connection problems there for a second, just to kind of reiterate some of what we said kind of after the video and between now was mainly just, that, even when, that basically that we, just reiterating the fact that we only have so much cognitive resources and so much energy to dedicate to things. And, with COVID, whether it's explicit problems that we're having to deal with, or whether it's just worry about general things to do with COVID, it kind of sucks our energy away. So that by the end of the day, a lot of times we can just feel more tired and we just have less energy to dedicate to things. And so, with this session, what we're really going to be focusing on is, kind of how Namik started here, of like identifying how we prioritize and what we identify as the problems we should be spending that energy on. So that we're not dedicating energy to every single thing that comes our way, because there's going to be a lot, and it'd be impossible to dedicate resources and energy to every single thing. And one example I was actually thinking of as Namik was talking is just like the problem of identifying a vaccine for COVID. Like, I know it's that is obviously not something I'm going to solve. But it's something that occupies my mind. Like I might look up, I look up articles on it of like, where are the things at in the process? What are they coming with next? And like I'm gathering, it's like my brain's gathering information as if it's a problem I'm needing to solve, even though it's not something in my control. And those things take up space and they take up energy, and dedicating cognitive resources to those take away from dedicating resources to things that we actually do have control over and that we can change. And so a lot of the other sessions with COVID Hero are focused on trying to kind of increase our energy levels in other ways, like increasing positive activities or mindfulness and other things that might make us feel refreshed and feel like we have more energy. But I feel like this session is really focused on like, how do you identify the problems to focus the energy you have on, so that you can try to get other things off of your plate. And then once you've identified that problem, what are the steps to go through to kind of solve that? Not necessarily that we're going to solve everyone's problems, but just the process of going through that. And so one thing I'd suggested is that if you're willing to share any kind of problems that you might be facing currently in the chat, we could use as an example as we go through. If not, we have examples that we'll go through, but if at any time you can think of something that you might be dealing with currently, please put it in the chat and we can address that specifically and use that as an example. So,
and one thing
I think that's all. Sorry, I think I covered everything that she might have missed. But
and one thing I'd like to add to that is that, we've gone over, as we go over some of the other skills like mindfulness, we can use that also to actually gain understanding and insight into what's in our control. And even the things that are in our control may seem overwhelming because there may be multiple steps to it. And so using sort of just awareness of the present moment to even think about and realize what's in our control at this very moment. So even though there are things in my control that I can do, but might have to be doing them later or at a different location, trying to focus on the present moment as well and focus on what's in my control this very moment and spend energy on that rather than planning for the next thing as well. So that may help kind of free up some of that cognitive energy and resources as well. So the next important thing is to break the big problems down into smaller chunks. And this really just goes to being very specific or being as specific as possible. And kind of and just breaking things down so that they're easier to tackle. So things that might be vague or big. So for example, I am not taking care of myself at this time, or I'm not self-caring, or I'm not exercising, or something like that. But basically, I'm not taking care of myself right now, and shifting that to saying something, I can't find time to exercise regularly, or I am not cooking my usual healthy meals right now. So taking really something that's vague, something that's bothering us, but that seems really big and insurmountable, and breaking it down into smaller chunks or into smaller problems that may be a little bit easier to tackle. Jessica, I'll direct this to you. If as you're thinking about what might be going on or what are some of the big problems that you're facing, think about how might you be able to break them down into smaller chunks or into smaller steps or into smaller problems, and feel free to even jot this down for yourself or write it down, and you can come back to it later. But maybe even now, if you want to think about, what is a smaller problem that is part of this that I can tackle. The other example is my family isn't getting along. So a specific smaller problem would be the kids are fighting over bathroom time. So trying to solve that seems a little bit easier than trying to solve a family not getting along. And so again, being specific and breaking it down. So go ahead, and if you would like to, you can write this down for yourself and something to work on as we move forward.
Yeah, and I'd also say, so for people who might be viewing this afterwards, after it might get posted or videoed, I would definitely try to even pause the video for a second and write down and be as specific as possible about a problem that you're wanting to solve and wanting to focus energy on at this time, so that you can kind of challenge yourself a little bit to kind of work through this as you're listening, so that you can actually put it into play in your real life. Because we know that some of these things probably, a lot of this might just be reminders of things that you already kind of know. The difference is that a lot of times we might know it, but we don't usually necessarily practice it. So the idea is with this video, watching it, or being a part of this, is kind of challenging yourself to really think about this and make yourself go through the steps as you're listening and as you go forward after this. So just thinking about a very specific problem you want to work on, and then kind of working through it as we go.
Okay. Do you want to take over, or do you want to keep going?
Sure, I can for a little bit. So then when we've kind of specified the problem, the next step is to set the goal. So the idea with this is to think about, okay, associated with this problem, what are we really wanting to happen? What are we wanting the outcome to be? What would that look like for us? And being as specific as possible as we can with this. So, and thinking of statements that might start with, I want X, or I need this, or and it could be I'm concerned that, or I'm afraid that, but I really like the first two best of thinking of what is the actual outcome of this that we would want to see happen. So for one example there is, I need 15 minutes to myself when I get home from work. So you might notice that that's very specific. It's it's not just I need some time to myself, or I need some time to unwind after work. It's I need 15 minutes, very specific about the time and very specific about when that's needed. And so then thinking through how to accomplish that gets a little bit easier than if it was more vague. Yeah. And so I know there was an
example here. So basically, an example of a problem for me right now would probably be feeling really tired and wanting to find a new job. So first off, those are two problems. So we want to take one at a time, right? And again, feeling really tired. So kind of thinking through what might be contributing to feeling really tired, not getting enough sleep, or not exercising enough, or working long hours. And so then identifying, I want to get more sleep, I need to get more sleep, or I need to get at least 7 or 8 hours of sleep. So that would be kind of setting a specific goal related to that. Related to wanting to find a new job would be, okay, so what does that look like? So what is it, a job in the same field? Is it a new job in a different department? And identifying that. And then it would be identifying steps to get that. It would be to look, I need to look for opportunities that are available right now. So that's one problem that can be tackled, or one goal that can be tackled. Applying for the job, even that can be broken further down. What materials are required for me to submit, and then breaking it down into that. And so those are the goals to be setting.
So, but I just want to point out that, so I know we didn't read it for word, but I think, the problem you put up is just a perfect example of kind of what we're talking about here, that so many people are dealing with, that it sounds like there's a lot of things bombarding you and taking away your cognitive resources and taking away your energy. So, I mean, just talking, so part of what you said is, you're feeling really tired, you want a new job, you're thinking about, how you're going to do that. But then at the same time, you're not eating very well because you don't have the energy and you feel too exhausted to go grocery shopping or to cook. So there's a lot of things going on there that, I think that would make anybody feel exhausted. And you add that's during, I imagine that's, part like COVID kind of adding to some of that in terms of some of those decisions, or just feeling tired, and grocery shopping is even more tiring now because of everything. That all of those things are just taking away those cognitive resources. And so what Namik was kind of suggesting is kind of breaking that apart, because there are 3 or 4 problems in there. And even though they're interrelated, that focusing on one aspect of that at a time, and then focusing on that, even if it's just, okay, I'm going to focus on this one aspect for the next few days, and I'm going to try to forget the rest for just a little bit, and then I will devote some attention to the next thing, so that you kind of hone in to try to focus your resources on one thing. Because if they're spread out and all these different worries and all these different things that are trying to get your attention, it's hard to have the energy to really solve any of them. And so focusing in on one and then making it really specific can often be very helpful for us in terms of breaking it down and focusing our resources on something. So, for example, if it's, okay, at first I'm going to try to make sure I'm eating well so that, I might not be as exhausted. And so if I'm eating better, maybe, I will have more resources in a few days, to focus on something else. And so, focusing on just that and thinking about, I want to be able to eat 3 meals a day, or something, and that being kind of the specific outcome that you're wanting to focus on first. Then I think that can be really helpful. And it's easier said than done. so I recognize that, because we all get stuck in these loops.
Also to prioritizing, right? It's like, what's the most important thing right now, and what's the most feasible thing right now. So, yeah. She says,
wonderful example. Great example.
Okay. And then once you've identified the goal, writing the goal down.
Yes. And making sure, one thing we haven't mentioned yet is also making sure those goals are realistic. So not going too far at first. So, for example, if, even with the example problem, it's like, you know what, I want a new job and I want this figured out by next week. I'm going to give myself 1 week and I'm going to figure out what that new job is and what that's going to look like, and that might be wonderful to try to get it, if you were able to get it figured out that fast. It's probably not realistic. And even, if your eating patterns are really off, then maybe 3 meals at a set time each day isn't realistic for you right now. Maybe someone might want to start out with 2 good meals a day, and then kind of work their way there. So it's setting up something that's really realistic in terms of your goals, so that you're not, putting your goal too far from where you currently are. And then you can always work towards another goal, another very specific goal that's realistic, that pushes you a little farther. Yep. So step 3?
Yep. So the next step would be to brainstorm. So coming up with all different ways of solving the problem. And this can actually be quite fun. And these ways to solve the problem can be, well, we want them to be realistic, but we can have some fun with it, I think, and really kind of think of all the different possible ways that we can solve the solution. And the idea is really to kind of get your brain going and finding different ways to tackle the problem later on that you're going to evaluate for their success. And so we don't want to judge ourselves for these kinds of problems. We really just want to jot down and put down as much as we possibly can. And the possible options can also be changing the situations altogether. So for example, in the idea of looking, if the job is stressful, it's looking for a different job, learning new skills, getting help or support from others, getting DoorDash that's healthy, lots of different things that we can put down. And some of them may be possible, others won't, but it's good to kind of give ourselves an idea of what our options look like. And so we really want to identify at least 10 different solutions for the problem that we are facing right now, so that we can then move on to the next step and evaluate what those are. So if you want to right now, you can start identifying some of these solutions, and then we can think about what might be possible.
Okay. So I don't think I have anything necessarily to add to that other than just to go through some examples. So this is an example we had of just, if someone was dealing with their kids struggling with distance learning and, a goal of kind of trying to help them manage this, that these were some things that could be brainstormed. So buying educational computer programs, hiring a tutor, setting aside more time each day to work with them, emailing their teachers for help, asking a partner to help them more, add extra work so that they can practice more, creating more manageable goals for them, or hiring a part or full-time childcare provider to help. So that'd be an example of just kind of brainstorming everything, right? And just to go with the example we were talking about before, like even if, if it's, I want to try to eat more regularly. So it could be, some examples of brainstorming might be, scheduling an alarm on your phone that tells you when you're wanting to eat, so you can try to, it can try to remind you, or buying a bunch of healthy snacks to have around that you can carry on you at any one time, or signing up for a meal plan that the meals get delivered to your door, or setting up something with a friend where the friend's going to remind you or try to keep you accountable to eating regularly. And I'm sure there's a whole lot more of different options that one could add. So again, I'm not necessarily trying to solve the problem, but just trying to think through like how you might brainstorm any potential option that there might be. And then as you think through those, so at this stage, you wouldn't evaluate those. You just be brainstorming any potential solution and not necessarily judging it at all.
Looking for other resources and asking people, how do you go about, dealing with this? How do you go about eating healthy, or even Googling how to eat healthier, whatever else, just kind of coming up with as many ideas as possible.
and try to make it fun, right? Like Namik said, like I know, you know, especially when you're exhausted and tired, but you know, I think of you know, not everybody, but for myself, you know, the time that I might spend checking the news about COVID or something, you know, that might actually be more fun to be spending that time, you know, Googling or checking on and thinking through what are some potential ideas for, you know, eating healthier, or potential ideas to help my kid with distance learning, or whatever that might be, would actually be more productive with our time. And yeah, I'm trying to be as creative as possible.
And the next step is to evaluate and choose the best solution. And this is sort of where you know, it's being focused and being a little bit more realistic and looking at that list and really getting rid of things that you think won't work, that are either not helpful or not reasonable, and really focusing on a couple of the options, or more than that, that might be helpful, that are doable, but that you're also like to try as well. And so if you've put on there, for example, some type of food that you know you're not going to like, and it was just kind of like a joke, it's probably not a good idea to go and try that. And so really kind of honing in on the things that are realistic, feasible, but that it's also something that you know will work for you, and then choosing those to then test out and try out. And one thing we also recommend is actually coming up with a couple of options that where you can combine kinds of things, and combining them and trying them together.
Yeah, and nice that the comment was, you know, using Pinterest as a, you know, potential way of getting ideas, and I think that's great, because that can actually be, you know, anyway, seeing images and things can be more engaging than just trying to read a list or come up with a list of things to potentially do. Absolutely, and like Namik has on here, you know, maybe a combination of options, right? Because I know, you know, for example, if trying to think, good example, like if someone's trying to exercise more, right, and they always go outside to the one park, of having a plan B sometimes in mind if it's pouring down rain and storming and they still want to get that in, having some sort of plan B. So I'm thinking, you know, with eating, it might be getting a combination of options. So, you know, one, and if you do have the energy to actually, you know, to make a recipe and to cook, another, if you're just done for the day and don't have that energy, of having a plan B, you know, in mind too. And so then it can be useful to have a, you know, combination of options that are all doable and realistic, and seem to be something you might want to try to put into play.
And this is so this kind of combination of what Robin is talking about, kind of makes me think of what happens with me if I don't, you know, if I don't feel like cooking or making a healthy meal. You know, the obvious next thing is, you know, well, fast food, and that's usually not the healthiest option. And so having a plan for the alternative could potentially help choose a better thing, right? And so if I have a healthier alternative already in mind before I get to that point where I'm just tired and don't really care, I may be more likely then to try that one as well, rather than to default on something that might not be as healthy for me. And so the next step is then, you know, you sort of pick an option and test it out. And the reason this is really important, and this also can be fun, is that some of the options that we might try may not work, and it's important to remember that this is now like almost like an experiment. We're gonna try some of these options out and see how they work for us and see what happens next. If something works, great, we keep doing that. If it doesn't, we move on to the next thing.
And sort of expecting that will happen too, right? I mean, not most problems, we're not going to be able to brainstorm, come up with the ideal solution, put it into play, and it works perfectly the first time and we're done. Usually what's going to happen is that either the solution we came up with really didn't work for us, and so we have to kind of go back to our brainstorming and think, okay, what else do we want to try next? Or it worked kind of, but you know, it helped a little bit, but it still didn't quite get me to where I want to be. And so then you know, thinking of combination, or how do you tweak that going forward. So I think kind of expecting that the first solution to a problem isn't usually going to be perfect. And there's always going to be, okay, now let's try again, and not getting down and not getting discouraged just because the first solution that you tried didn't necessarily work.
So for the example we had here, you may decide that getting an educational program or hiring a virtual tutor is not something that's going to work. Hiring a part-time or full-time child care provider may not be something to help, but you kind of honed in on setting aside time each day to work with the kid on the distance learning, asking the partner to help and creating more manageable goals for them. And so now these are the ones then to try and see how they work. And again, like this list is something that's fluid, that can be revisited, that can be added on, that can be modified further or broken down further. Some things that are not an option right now, like emailing the teacher, may be available in a week or in a few days. And so kind of it's always a good start and something that we can go back to and keep checking on and modifying.
And one thing, a theme throughout this is, being specific, being more specific. So like, even on these things, once you brainstorm and you have these things, like these are also even pretty vague. Like, so after when you went to implement these things, you'd want to be very specific. So setting aside time each day to work more with them. Obviously, that's going to be easier to implement if you get really specific on, I'm going to set aside 15 more minutes in the evening, when I get home from work to focus on this, while whatever else might be going on, or in the morning, I'm going to get up this, a little bit earlier to spend a little bit of time with, with my kiddo to set this up. So being very specific about that plan. So it sounds like, from the example that was provided, it sounds like one of the specific things that you've implemented is meal planning, and so, for some people it might be, okay, I'm going to set aside this amount of time on Sunday, to meal plan and freeze some things for myself for throughout the week, or something. But being very specific about when things are going to happen and how they're going to be implemented, because, the implementation of your solutions, again, seems simple, but sometimes this, segue from idea to action it can be one of the difficult ones. So being very, very specific and realistic in those goals. So obviously, like setting aside 2 extra hours every day isn't going to be realistic for probably anybody, whether it's distance learning or meal prep or whatever it is. An extra 2 hours of anything, isn't necessarily realistic. But sometimes we want to jump to those things because we're really ambitious and we really want to, fix something. So making sure that we're very specific and realistic in, what actions we're taking too.
That's really that for this session. Going forward, there's other sessions that we'll be bringing up or bringing back, and so including managing difficult reactions with mindfulness, finding ways to connect and reconnect with friends and family for support, and then enhancing positive emotions and meaning, and finding also ways to manage thoughts that might be upsetting that are coming up during this time. So,
if there's any questions that come up after, for those that are live on this right now, you can, just put it in the message thing if you have any questions you want us to address right now. But even later, feel free to contact us, email us with any questions, or even additional suggestions for things we could incorporate into this session. But also those that might be watching the video, definitely, reaching out if you have any additional questions, that we can maybe help work through, and because we know we can't address everything, and sometimes things might not be completely clear, especially if we're not able to work through very specific examples with people. So reach out if you have any questions.